Right. Well, welcome everybody. We've got a nice, fun group here today. I'm Coach Chris, head coach for Team to End AIDS, and I've got Jonathan Harris, the program director here as well. He'll be monitoring the chat as we go through and we talk about race week. We have one of the world's largest marathons and the world's fastest marathon, with the most recent world record having been set here last year. Um, but this presentation is for our charity athletes Team Done AIDS. We'll kind of give you some general Chicago Marathon tips and also cover our race specific updates for this year, what we're doing for the team. But if you see me mention my coaching business is 4 Star Endurance, and for many of you who know me very well, I like to geek out on numbers when we talk about metabolic testing and pacing, all that. So we'll do a separate geeky presentation as well, not part of this, but I'll share details if you really want to geek out on pacing your marathon. But hey, we are here. The training season is done. We have logged as a group over 50,000 miles of running. So 26.2 is really not that much. If it's your first marathon, you've done the work already. This is just going to be a nice, fun victory lap to pick up the medal and celebrate all the fitness that you have achieved as part of the team, as part of an individual getting to a new fitness level and experiencing the victory lap in what is one of the greatest world marathon major races out there. So I'm going to be talking about the course, a couple minor changes this year. The course is pretty much the same, but aid stations and a couple little things have changed. I'll give you some general marathon tips as well. We'll talk about the weather, we'll talk about spectating, and then I'll also talk through kind of like a whole race morning walkthrough, talking about the schedule and the things that we'll be doing. So to jump right in, for those of you who don't know me, just a little bit about my background real quick. I have run the Chicago Marathon 10 times. I've done over 40 marathons. I'm a big triathlete as well. So a lot of my endurance background is from working with a wide range of endurance athletes. And I actually live and work on the marathon course, oddly enough. I walk across the marathon course every day. My metabolic lab is actually just through one of the walls that you'll be running alongside as you run through the first mile of the marathon course. So I know this course very well. I run around it all the time. And I support, obviously, our Team Done AIDS group here in Chicago, but also for all of you who are remote coming to Chicago from out of town. I'll be looking forward to seeing you guys. And hopefully you've been following our training program. I know a lot of you have your own programs, but you can find me on a lot of the different training apps and plan tools. We use Training Peaks predominantly, but I'm also on Run, Garmin, Stride, and a bunch of other apps. So if you want to geek out on any of your data heading into race week, feel free to reach out. All right, let's talk about the Chicago Marathon. So last year we had our 1 millionth finisher at the Chicago Marathon. It was a huge milestone. We also had the world record set. Kelvin Kiptum ran a 2 hour and 35-second marathon in Chicago. And for those of you who are wondering, I know we talk about negative splits a lot. And yes, of course, to break a world record, you typically need to run a negative split. So he did his first half in 1 hour and 40 seconds, and he did his second half in under an hour, blistering pace. The race itself is actually 27 miles long, for those who don't know. It's not just 26.2. They have a finisher festival at mile 27, so you do have to walk pretty far to get there, another 0.8 miles to get to the finisher festival. But we have our own VIP area set up for our charity athletes, so you don't have to walk quite that far to get to a nice indoor area where we celebrate afterwards. There are a couple new things. There is a new fast track that they have for participants. It's already sold out, so you might see this. This is a express lane to get into the race, and also a kind of VIP porta potty option that is new this year. So you might see that on race morning. But pretty much everything else is the same. Finish Fest, the whole area where the Finish Fest is and where the race venue starts and finishes is for runners only. It only opens to family at 9:30 a.m., ends at 4 p.m. as usual. They do have spectator seating at the finish line now again, which people get into as early as 8:30 a.m., but that is a paid option. So if you have friends or family that want to see you cross the finish line, just know that is there, but they do need to get tickets for that. Last year, we had almost 50,000 runners. We had over 50,000 registered officially, but 48,428 finishers. This year, we're probably expecting to see 50,000 official finishers. That should be a record year in terms of participants. There's, I think almost 2,000 additional charity athletes this year. About 16,000 of those runners are all charity athletes. About a quarter of the field are first timers for running a marathon. About a quarter are also from Chicago. About a third of the field, though, is international, believe it or not. So very big international percentage. And half of the runners are actually first time runners to Chicago. So almost half the field are doing Chicago for their first time. There are over 200 charities. Since 2002 now, the marathon and all the athletes fundraising through the marathon have raised almost a third of $1 billion. So you guys are all a part of that. The expo is still in McCormick Place. So it's downtown, just about a mile and a half south from where the race is. They do still recommend arriving early, and we'll talk about this. The wheelchair start is at 7:20 a.m. First wave 7:30, second wave 8, and third wave is at 8:35. But you do need to get into the race venue at least an hour, hour and a half before your start time, because they close down corrals early. We have a little VIP area where we'll meet up and we'll walk you guys in together to make sure everyone is on schedule. The time limit is still 6.5 hours from the last starter. So about a 15-minute mile pace is what you need to hold. If you do go slower than that, you can still finish. They do start reopening the roads and they make people walk on the sidewalks for the final miles if you're past that last cutoff time. And only about 8% of runners do what we call a negative split, running the second half of the race faster than the first. It's something we always encourage people to try to plan to do in their pacing strategies to really guarantee a good race. And we've seen some nice improvement. Actually, the last 2 years, our T2 group has been averaging over 16% of our runners now consistently have been running a negative split. It used to be around the race average around 8%, but it's been gradually going up over the years. So great job. Our average finish time for our charity athletes for Team NAVIN have been almost 4.5 hours. So actually right around or even faster than the race average. And if you're familiar with Oprah Winfrey, who used to be a big Chicago celebrity, native to Chicago, now not so much, but she ran her first marathon, and her PR, the time that we always have people usually try to shoot for, is about 4.5 hours. If you can beat Oprah by running a 4:29 marathon, that is your goal. Chicago is also part of the World Marathon Majors. For those of you who aren't familiar, those are the kind of 6 major, the largest marathons around the world. I think Berlin just broke the record with over 54,000 runners. London and New York are also around that 50,000 runner mark. But we got a lot of people now going for completing the series, completing all 6. And next year, they might be adding Sydney as a 7th marathon major. So stay tuned for that. So a couple very important things. If you want to make sure you hit all the basics, you get all the information covered. There's actually a lot of information out there on the website, and it's not always the most obvious, but there's a participant guide and an official program. These are kind of PDF files. They actually print some of them physically. At the expo, you can usually pick one up. But these are very long. They have a lot of sponsor information, but a lot of important information about the race. So the participant guide has all the information you need to know. It's actually 46 pages long. The official program is more kind of just like the fun to know information, the stories, and some spectator helpful information. That's 100 pages long. So if you want some material to read this week, go through both of those. You can also find pretty much all the information, including links to these guides and everything, both through the QR codes that got posted here, but also through the official Chicago Marathon phone app. So if you don't have the phone app, I highly recommend you download that now. We also have within the app, you can track people. So you can look up your friends if you want to add yourself to the tracker to see where other people are during the race if you're spectating or friends and family. I don't think they've officially posted the interactive map, but I have some links down here. So the tracker might not be live yet, or the cheer one might not be active yet, but they have in the app a cool feature where you can leave a note for another runner. And what happens is during the marathon, as you run past a couple points on course, they have these giant interactive billboards. And as you run across a timing mat, the message that someone leaves for you pops up on the screen. So if you want to, while we're going through this presentation, if you know somebody else running the marathon, download the app, leave a message for them. And some years you can even upload a photo, an image onto there. And if they miss it while running, it gets emailed to them after the race. So it's a fun little thing to do. I think last year they had one in the biofreeze zone. Sometimes they have it on the north end. Sometimes they have it a couple points along the course. So definitely check that out. It's a fun little thing to get involved with. If you cover all that, you get the app, you read the participant guide, you'll know pretty much everything you need to know. All right, so let's jump right in. Let's talk about the course. So the course starts right in downtown Chicago. We just did our little recon run this past weekend. We ran the first couple miles of the course to kind of see what it was like. And in Chicago, they paint this blue hashed line across all the city streets. It's really mostly for the wheelchair racers to know where to go if they're in the front of the race, but it's fun to know where the course is because that blue line actually gives you kind of generally the shortest path to run from start to finish. So as you're running the marathon, you can look down and try to follow that blue line. It starts right downtown at Columbus and Monroe, and there's this honorary Kerry Pinkowski sign. He's the race director of the marathon. So right there at the start line is always a street sign that's named in his honor. So we're going to watch the video here. I can turn the audio off here, but you can watch this. We have the links posted. We've had a lot of our own athletes record the whole course as well. This is, I think, from a couple of years ago, so it might not be 100% accurate, but this is the current course. Starts downtown in Grant Park. You go underneath a first little section that is underneath a upper road. So you lose GPS signal. That's one thing to know. You can lose your GPS signal. And then you do a loop through the north side, going up through Wrigleyville, Boys Town, and then you run back down to downtown, and that's your first 13.1 miles. Then you head back out to the west side. You do a little out and back to the United Center, where the Bulls play, and the Blackhawks. And you go through Greektown and Little Italy, through the Pilsen neighborhood, and then down through Chinatown. That's when you start hitting mile 20, where it gets real tough. Once you get through Chinatown, you now cross over right away to Michigan Avenue, where this small change they did in the last couple of years, you do kind of an out and back loop on the south end now, running down Michigan Avenue and then back up it to the finish line. We hit the final biggest hill, the Roosevelt Hill, right before the finish line. But it is one of the flattest World Marathon major courses. It is where obviously the world record has been set multiple times. So it is a great course. You go through 29 neighborhoods. They now estimate that there's almost 2 million spectators on course. So I think only New York and maybe London have more spectators. There are clocks every mile and every 5K. It's extremely well marked and staffed in terms of signage and clocks and aid stations. The aid stations this year have changed a little bit. They have the usual water and Gatorade. Every aid station, in case you're wondering, has a medic tent, toilets. They even have transportation back. So if you get injured or whatnot, go to any aid station and they have runner transportation back to the finish festival area. The new thing this year, though, is now there are 3 gel aid stations instead of 2, and they've changed from Gatorade to Morton gel. If you're not familiar with Morton, Morton is more of like a jelly-like gel. A little more solid-y compared to some of the liquidy gels out there. And they're putting 3 of them out there because they're kind of designing this as a fueling plan for you. Usually, and we'll talk about this later, but if you take in about 3 or 4 gels for the first half of the race, that you don't have to carry as much because they're going to provide you with gels pretty much at the frequency you need to get through the second half of the race. And so they put them strategically at mile 13.6, right as you head west from the loop area, and then mile 18.2 and mile 23. So they will have both caffeinated and non-caffeinated gels. The caffeinated ones will be in a white package. The non-caffeinated will be in a black package. So if you want to use those, definitely make sure you've tried them before race day, hopefully, or at least taste them so you get used to the texture if you haven't. Bananas now are not going to go all the way. I think that last year they actually went to almost like mile 24. This year, bananas will be at the aid stations between mile 19.3 and 23.0. It's a little narrower range than the past for bananas. But the big thing I always point out, they still have the same big gaps between two specific ranges on course. So these are good to know because you don't want to miss the aid stations at mile 3.2, so around the 5K mark, because it's almost 2 miles until you hit the next aid station early on. And then the real challenging one is mile 20 to mile 22.3. So you're almost going, or you're going over 2 miles without an aid station. And so make sure you definitely plan for that. Make sure you get plenty of hydration at mile 20. That's when you really begin to start hurting. At mile 21, they do have a biofreeze station. That's where they spray biofreeze on you if you have muscle cramping. They have volunteers who have biofreeze sprays that you can get, but they don't have water and hydration there. So just make note of that. Because from my point of view, that's where you really need the hydration. So make sure you get plenty at mile 20 so you can get through that 2-mile stretch. Typical things, you can't have backpacks as usual. Getting into the race site, you can only bring the clear bags in, and you can't bring camelbacks. And if you have liquids, they might ask you to dump them. So basically, you want to have you can take hydration belts, and they have the details here on the bottom. So camelbacks and any type of hydration backpacks are not permitted, but fuel belts are okay. Handheld water bottles are okay. But be aware that you might have to empty them. So it's better to bring, like if you have a powder mix, bring the powder. You can fill up with the water inside of Grant Park and then add your drink mix to it. So make sure you plan for that. Also, no selfie sticks. You can do, I think, video, but you just can't have a camera on a extended selfie stick, just as a safety concern. So those are the main details of the course. You can see also they have different pace groups at all the different mileage points. So you can feel free to kind of look through the detail. There is an interactive map built into the app, or you can use the QR code that's posted here. With that, you can actually zoom in and see where cheer stations are. And I've highlighted here the 3 different areas that we're going to have cheer stations. I'll talk about these in more detail, but if you have friends and family that want to come out and cheer with a couple of our other coaches and staff and friends, we'll have 1 cheer station up here on the north side, and then we'll have 2 down on the south side, one at the out and back section along Michigan Avenue at mile 22 and 24, and then another one right before the final mile at the end. So I'll tell you guys about those details. But like I mentioned, just take a look at the map. Make sure you know where those stretches are, where the big gap is between the mile 20 aid station and then mile 22, with that biofreeze recovery zone in the middle, because that's always a stretch where most people really start struggling. So the aid stations are extremely well supported, even compared to the other marathon majors. I think Chicago has the best aid stations. Some of them are 2 city blocks long, just tons of volunteers, really, really well stocked and staffed. All right, let's talk about getting to the race. So one thing to note, in case you haven't looked at this in the athlete guide, for the expo, there are multiple parking options. There is a cheaper parking option in parking lot C. It's a little further away, but the usual parking is about $26 if you're driving down to the expo. I'll actually do a little shakeout run to the expo on Friday and Saturday if anybody wants to jog down to the expo from downtown. It's just 1.5 miles from the middle of the loop. There on race morning, however, there are divvies and bike valet. So if you haven't been familiar with this, World Bicycle Relief does a free bike valet down at Michigan Avenue and Van Buren. You just have to pick up your bikes by 4 p.m. The Divvy, they actually have a Divvy code you can use to get a free unlock of a Divvy or lift. So take advantage of that. That goes through the end of October. And they do have a Divvy valet at Michigan Avenue in Jackson. So on race morning, if you want to use those options to get down, just know where they are and that they are there. But like I mentioned, inside of Grant Park, they have gear check, but you can't bring backpacks. You can't bring luggage. You can only bring a clear bag that they give you at the expo. And again, you can't have camelbacks or hydration backpacks with bladders in them, but you can have water bottles on a fuel belt or handheld. Those are okay, but you might have to fill them after you get inside. So just make note of that. That's something they started a few years ago. All right, now let's talk about the course. So mile by mile, this is what the start line generally looks like. It is busy. It is one of the biggest marathons in the world. Super exciting, a lot of energy at the start. But you actually start running uphill, so it's easy to get your adrenaline pumping and your heart rate a little bit too high. So make sure you plan to go extra easy. I recommend starting on the right-hand side because as you can see here, the road kind of shifts to the right naturally, and you can see this little blue hash mark. That is the shortest path. So if you want to take the shortest path possible, stay on the right side and follow the blue line as you go uphill, and then you go underneath Lower Columbus here. So this thing is important to note because a couple things early in the morning, it is going to be pretty dark. Your GPS watch will lose signal. So unless you're using a shoe pod or something, know that your mileage might be off a little bit. Also, there's no spectator access for about the first half mile or so until you cross the river. So you won't have like friends and family on the side until you get past that first half mile, roughly quarter mile to half mile. So once you start running underneath Lower Columbus, it does get dark. You can see here there is actually, and it's hard to see in this photo because it's so blurry, but there is a concrete median in the middle. So make sure you are watching where you step. If you have sunglasses on, like here, I put them on my head to run through the dark tunnel area. Just make sure you're running safe through that first mile. And then when you come out from the tunnel, you cross this bridge. This is the first bridge that you cross. Couple of things to note about it. This is where you can have spectators along the side. So if you want someone to high five you or see you right when you start, that first bridge on Columbus is the place to be. Also, the bridges have this metal grating surface that is a little bit scary sometimes. The first time you run across it, it is see-through. You can see down into the water. And you can drop stuff through there, so you don't want to drop your cell phone or nutrition on this part of the course. But they put carpeting. They usually have this red carpeting or blue carpeting they put out to cover that up. So if it's raining, just watch your set, especially if you have the carbon-plated shoes with really high stack height, and your footing is not quite as stable as you might have in some other shoes. Just be cautious. Even the carpeting can sometimes fold over itself a little bit and get a little bumpy. So just be very careful when you're running across the bridges. This is what it looks like from an aerial view. You can see the carpeting they usually put down in the middle. So you can run on either side of the road. They have both lanes always shut down, and the carpeting is usually towards the middle. So if you want to plan to run on that carpeting, just aim to be in the middle of the road as you go across the bridge. And then once you go across that first bridge, you'll go down, you'll make a left. And there is one area where it gets a little tight here. So you go from almost 4 lanes wide down to 2 lanes wide as you go west on Grand under Michigan Avenue. So if you feel like it starts to cluster up, people are getting really tight, or the traffic is kind of backing up with how many people are running at once, just know that it will begin to open back up again. So just go with the flow. You don't have to worry about setting a PR in that first mile. You want to keep your heart rate low. So have some fun with it. If you cheer for each other in the underground sections, your voice echoes, and that creates quite a bit of energy. All right, so once you get through that first mile and you're coming south on State Street, you go and you hit your first aid station. But the first 5K, if you look at the map, the first 5 kilometers, you're actually going over the river 3 times. So most the elevation gain of the entire Chicago Marathon course, you hit in the first 5K. So just be aware of that. It's easy to have your heart rate go a little too high early on. So just make sure you go nice and easy. Don't worry about your mile splits. Just soak it in, smile, enjoy the energy from the spectators, because your GPS signal with all the tall buildings around makes it a little bit tough to get your mileage very accurate. So what I recommend is once you come out of the loop at mile 3, that's a great time to hit the lap button on your watch if you want to sync up your watch with the mile markers. And it's also a good time to take in your first gel about 5 kilometers in. Start your fueling early if you want to have a good race on race day. Also, try not to do anything new on race day. You will see a lot of people in costumes. It's always fun to see, but if you don't practice running with a costume on, I wouldn't recommend it. It could cause some chafing that you have to run with for a lot of miles after. So make sure all your gear you've run in at least a couple times. If you've got any new clothing, any new shoes, socks, make sure you break those in. And on race day, just soak in the first half. Really, the first half of the marathon should feel like a warm up. You want to go nice and easy, nice and controlled. Sometimes we like to break up the marathon into 3 10s, 10 miles of fueling, where you focus on getting all your gels in, staying on top of, fueling your body. The next 10 miles are just 10 miles of hydrating. And you're doing all that to set up for the last 10K. The last 10K is really where the race begins. And if you haven't been fueling or hydrating well, that last 10K can be pretty tough. So really think about mentally having that strategy of you're just fueling, you're just hydrating, and getting ready for that last 10K. If you do have friends or family who are spectating, make sure that you know what side of the street they're going to be on. I don't know if you guys can spot any of our Team to End AIDS friends in this photo. It is hard to spot them, but we have at least one or two. But you can see with how many signs there are, how many spectators there are, it could be very hard to find somebody if you're looking for somebody out there, both as an athlete or as a spectator. So try to coordinate ahead of time. Think about what side of the street you're going to be on. We usually have one of our photographers stationed, and we'll give you guys tips on where they are, usually on the right-hand side through the first several miles. So think about that ahead of time if you do have friends or family that are going to go out on any part of the course. But there's a lot of fun stuff out there. Fleet Feet's usually out there with their Elvis cheer station and hydration station. As you're coming back into the loop, you'll see those big digital cheer signs. Sometimes they're sponsored by BioFreeze, sometimes it's a bank. This is Merrill Lynch one year. But send people some cheer messages. You can actually see here, this is my wife, Shelly, left me a cheer message when I ran the marathon one time. So you can get some good motivation along the way if you keep your eyes open for that. All right. And then once you get back downtown, this is what it looks like as you come back downtown, only it'll be a lot more crowded. This is the mile 13 mark as you cross the river. This will be a unique area where the train is running on top of you, the L tracks. And you'll notice there is some metal grating here on this bridge, but there's also the bike path is actually completely paved with concrete. So if you're being a little strategic on this part and you don't want to run over the metal grating, just look for that little concrete patch of the bike path. But be cautious because there are these kind of metal expansion joints between the bridge and the street on the other side. I did have somebody actually trip and fall right in front of me one year when I was running the marathon at this point. They were so focused on spectators, they weren't watching where their feet were going. So definitely make sure you watch your footing over all the bridges. And then as you get through the rest of the course, if you do start getting some cramping, just know that when you hit that mile 20 mark and you're hitting that last 10K, there is a lot of support out there. The BioFreeze area, this is what it looks like. You have these volunteers that'll spray a nice cooling spray to help relieve your muscle cramping. So if you need that, go for it. That's what they're there for. Right after BioFreeze, you'll hit Chinatown. This is where a lot of people begin to hit the wall. But I encourage you to stay to the right and look for the photographers and try to smile if you're struggling a little bit. This is usually a fun photo spot. Both the official race photographers and sometimes our own Team 10 AIDS photographers are out there trying to get a good photo of you for the final 10K. Really high energy spot. But yeah, here's what one of the photos looks like as you come through that Chinatown entrance. This is, I like to say, this is where the real race begins. From the 20-mile point on is where it gets real tough. So use the crowd, use the energy. If you want to get a good photo, look for the photographers and smile, because even if you're hurting, if you smile, it helps to ease the tension just that little bit more. But a good thing that I like to have in the back of my head is, besides having fun and engaging with spectators, you can stop for a couple adult beverages if you really are having a bad day and just want to unwind a little bit. But in general, whether you're going for an aggressive time or you just want to have fun, if you're feeling good, your fueling and hydrating seems to be working, keep hydrating. And if you're feeling cranky, that's usually a sign that your blood sugar is low. Eat more, and all day long, just eat and drink small amounts constantly. That will get you to the finish. Um, and then the final part, once you come back up from Michigan Avenue in the south side, there is a final mile, that final stretch. You'll turn right on, this is Roosevelt Road. This is looking west down the hill of Roosevelt. Don't push it. Do not push it on the uphill. Wait until after you get up the Roosevelt Hill and you're past this 400 meters to go sign. This is where everyone is completely depleted. And if you start picking up the pace, guess what? Muscles will cramp. They actually line this whole hill with medical volunteers because roughly every 20 yards or so, somebody ends up cramping and, either falling a little bit or stumbling or feeling a little uneasy. So they have a whole crew of medical staff that are hanging out here because they know this is where people tend to have muscle cramping issues quite a bit. So go easy on the Roosevelt Hill. Wait until you've turned the final corner and you can finally see that finish line. Then you can pick up the pace if you want to. This is one year I was running with one of our Team AIDS athletes, and he broke into tears when he saw that finish line. So soak it up, enjoy it. You deserve it. All the training you've done comes to the culmination of crossing that finish line. So it can be a quite emotional and rewarding experience once you get there. So you can see here, 200 meters to go. This is what that final finish chute looks like as you're going down. So it is a good long stretch. One year, if you want to look up a couple old marathon finishes, there have even been sprint finishes where someone lost the race in the last 200 meters because of how long this stretch is. So it's a fun race and it can be very dramatic as well. All right. So some logistics, a couple of quick things when you do cross the finish line, and I'll go in a little more detail later, but it's good to know that we have a special setup for all of our Team NA's athletes. We have a meeting spot before the race starts and after the race finishes. And this is also where we encourage you to tell your friends and family to come, especially if it's a cold day and you don't want to be out in the cold. You don't want to do any extra walking. When you cross the finish line, you're actually coming up Roosevelt here, up Columbus, and then you have to walk almost another mile to get to the 27th mile Finish Fest field where the runner reunite area is. Or instead of walking there, you can turn left, head west down Congress, down Ida B. Wells Drive. One block over from Michigan Avenue is where our T2 HQ is. We rent out the Roosevelt University's gymnasium, a big indoor space where we will meet up before and after the race. We'll have foods, we'll have drink, we'll have massage, we have showers, indoor plumbing. And this is where we reunite with our friends, our athletes, our coaches. So we encourage you to meet us here in the morning and also after the race. So if you're talking to friends and family about where to meet you after the race, the easiest thing is if they want to meet you in Grant Park, meet right on Congress here as you come out, or just have them meet you straight back at T2HQ. One of our athletes, Fred, actually videotaped his whole race start to finish. So if you want to watch that, you can see him walking in to the T2HQ after finishing with that little QR code there. All right. So now let's get into some general tips, get a little more specific about your fueling, your hydrating, and your pacing. If you want to be able to finish strong, like Coach Marsha here, flexing her guns, fueling is the most important thing. If this is going to be your longest race of your life ever, for a lot of you, if it's your first marathon, you probably need to eat a little bit more than you have ever before as well to fuel for that. And anytime you're going over 3 hours of running, I know a couple of you might actually be able to go under that, but in general, for all of us doing the marathon, for most of us, it's going to be a lot more than 3 hours. So if you need to, write down your fueling plans, so you actually think it through, look at the course map, think about where you're going to take in Gatorade. Are you going to alternate aid stations? Get water at one aid station, get Gatorade at the next. If you're taking any gels in, think about taking those in when you get water. And you want to see the total amount of grams of carbs adding up to enough to help replace some of what you're burning. And this is a new couple of little pieces of information from Morton, so the new gel provider. And this is very similar to the guidance that I've been giving most of you all season long about how much to take in. So they have a simple plan here. They say during the warm up, about 15 minutes or so before the race, take one gel in. It can be any type of gel. They have Gel 100 is their basic one. CAF 100 is their caffeinated gel. They also have these bigger gels called the Gel 160s. These are basically how many calories are in them. So 100 calories or 160. Take a little bit in before the race. And then during the race, they usually recommend about 6 to 7 gels or roughly one gel every 5K. So if you want to make your fueling plan simple, just say every time you see a 5K marker sign, take in a gel. That can be the simplest fueling plan for race day. And then you just drink some water and Gatorade along the way, and that'll ensure that you're getting enough calories in. But if you want to get more specific, they do even have guidance based on how fast you're running. So if you're a faster runner, you will need to fuel more per hour. So you might actually want to take in a gel up to every 20 minutes. But for most of us, taking one gel every 30 minutes is a good general guideline, regardless of what your pace really is. So if you want to go by kilometers, think every 5K. If you want to go by time, do at least every 30 minutes, up to maybe every 20 minutes, get in roughly 100 calories. That's the simplest fueling plan for race day. And they did in your emails from the marathon, you got a link for 20% off if you want to stock up on any last minute gels, but they'll certainly have them at the expo as well. My general strategy, just to give you an example, I usually write this down ahead of time before the race just to think through my morning. I do what I call my 3-2-1 taper. This is to top off my fueling. So generally, I'll wake up about 3 hours before the race starts, and I'll aim to get in about 300 calories, maybe my last bit of solids, whether it's some type of oatmeal, protein shake, maybe a peanut butter bagel, banana, just enough to kind of top off and not too much that it isn't going to take a long time to digest. And then about 2 hours before the race, usually when I'm showing up at our T2 HQ in the morning, I'll take in another 200 calories. And that might be a gel and a Gatorade or a banana. And then I'll usually take one gel with me as I go into the race. And once I get through security, I'll top off with another 100 calories. So 300 calories 3 hours before, 200 calories 2 hours before, 100 calories 1 hour before. And that's a good amount where it's not too much, but it definitely helps to top off your tank. And the more you keep it liquid, the easier it is to digest. And then in race, like I mentioned, one gel every 5K is a good goal. If you're someone who weighs more or less, I sometimes adjust it by body weight. I say just 100 calories for every 100 pounds of body weight per hour. So 150-pound athlete taking 150 calories per hour in gels, up to 2 times that amount. So 1 to 2 times your body weight, basically, per hour in calories. You can also do it by distance, like I mentioned, or by time. Just remember the Morton gels are mile 13, 18, and 23. So my plan is to take 4 gels in with me at the start. I'll use those in the first half of the race. And then my picture didn't show up here, but 3 gels that I'll pick up at the aid stations on course. And that'll give me 7 gels total. That'll be all the calories I need start to finish pretty much. And I can rely on a little bit of Gatorade and water here to stay hydrated in between. I also like to bring some salt chews as well, just something extra in case I cramp up a bit. When you do finish, by the way, one thing that does help to have planned in the back of your head, because it usually is cooler when you're finishing, your body temperature can drop pretty quick once your heart rate goes down. So grab the Mylar blankets that they hand out, the little like aluminum foil wraps that you can wrap your body up with. Helps you to maintain your body temperature, and that helps you get your appetite back after the race too. So we think a lot about what to do before the race and during, but not after. So have a little post-race fueling plan too. This is usually my plan: drink a bottle of water, drink a bottle of Gatorade, then slowly, once I'm ready, I'll get some protein in a little bit later. And that's when I'll finally, hopefully, have settled back down, feel normal again, and I can enjoy my first adult beverage. And then I'll keep hydrating and keep having another protein shake, another adult beverage, some solid food. But yeah, think about that post-race fueling strategy as well. All right, so a couple hydration tips. Again, nothing new on race day. If you've been using something, if you've been running with a handheld bottle or hydration belt, use that on race day. This isn't the time to try something brand new. Just grab what you have been using all season, stick to that plan as best you can, and just think about small amounts constantly. You know, every time you're taking in some liquid, try to have a little bit of sugar, a little bit of salt. That's usually my plan. If you just drink water, you will end up by the end of the race having low blood sodium if you didn't get enough salt in. That's what we call hyponatremia. That can be very bad for you. You don't want to just drink water. A lot of people do end up in the hospital if they just drink water all day long and no Gatorade, no salts. So make sure you're getting sugar, salt, everything is just everything in moderation and everything to stay balanced. You're trying to maintain the hydration level, the osmolality of your body. Review the course map, though, like I mentioned, look at where the aid stations are. My usual strategy is to alternate at aid stations. At one aid station, I'll get a cup of water and I'll take a gel in. And then at the next aid station, I'll drink some Gatorade. And then I'll just keep alternating that from start to finish. Super simple plan, works great, makes sure I'm taking a gel in roughly every 5 kilometers that way too. So easy way to plan your fueling. A good way to check after the race, though, or if you're stopping at one of the aid stations, they do have porta potties at every aid station as well. You know, make sure you're not getting dehydrated, hypernatremia. If you pee, make sure your urine is not golden or brown. You want to be a light yellow color is ideal. Because that's also a sign that your body is not storing enough sugar too, right? Your body stores 3 to 4 grams of water for every gram of sugar you store in your body in glycogen. So taking in the sugar helps you to stay hydrated. So if you have questions, hopefully by now you've kind of dialed things in, but just want to remind you of those so you've got at least some plan that you can write down together. All right. So pacing, how do we do this thing called a negative split? That's our goal typically for a marathon. If you want to feel great, if you want to feel strong in the second half, it's one of the hardest things to do. It's not just about fueling, it's about pacing smart. So the first 5K that you run, realize that because the GPS signals might get lost, don't worry about your splits. You know, you can look at the race clocks when you pass the mile markers, but depending on when you start, you might not know what that first mile is. You can always look at the race clock when you start the race. With GPS now, there's some more advanced stuff. I'm not going to get into the super detailed things. I've made a little video I can post on YouTube if you're curious about GPS settings on your watches and Garmin's to get the best signal. Basically, just don't worry too much about your splits. Realize that your GPS signal might be a little bit high or low in the first couple miles. So what I like to do is just hit the lap button to sync it up anytime I see a mile marker sign. And that helps to ensure that your watch then is accurate from that point on. And then watch your heart rate. That's really the most important thing. You want to be running most of the marathon in what we call the green zone, zone 3, you know, about 70 to 80% of your max heart rate, building up into zone 4. If you're a more aggressive athlete, you can run in that zone 4. But ideally, you want to stay out of the red zone. You want to stay a good 5% or at least 5 to 10 beats below your anaerobic threshold or lactate threshold, which is a 90% effort. That's usually just a guarantee that you'll have enough energy to finish that race strong. If you don't have a heart rate monitor, I like to focus on breathing. If you've been following the training plan and seen all the tips on the asymmetric breathing, just keep nice, easy breathing rate. If you correlate it to your footsteps, take 3 steps as you breathe in, 4 steps as you breathe out. That's a great way to just keep your effort level nice and controlled. You should feel like you could always pick up the pace if you needed to. And that just ensures that if you're in zone 3 or zone 2, your body is using more fat as a fuel source. Your body has almost a limitless supply of energy stored in body fat. So take advantage of it. And then be smart on race day too. If you want to make the race course as easy as possible, follow that blue line, run the tangents, like try to look ahead and always see which way the course is going, if it's left or right. If it's a hot day or a cool day, look for sun or look for shade to keep your body temperature where it needs to be. But most importantly, just smile. Try to feed off the energy from the crowd, get some good photos, high five little kids along the way. It's amazing. It seems silly, but it does give you a good power up. If you do want to geek out more on any of your pacing or planning, we do now have a tool. We've got a free 2-month trial with this. You can actually put in your baseline fitness numbers from any of your runs during the season, and it'll estimate what your finish time will be and how you should pace it. This is a tool called RunDot. On our website, we have a free link. You can get a 2-month trial. If anyone wants me to talk them through it, come see me or send me a message. But it's a pretty straightforward tool that it'll take the actual marathon course you're doing, Chicago or otherwise, and it'll take your fitness data in and predict exactly what you'll do for a finish time based on the environmental conditions, the weather forecasts. It'll even change it up to like a day before the race if the weather changes. So it'll tell you exactly how to pace your best race. So check that out if you like. Also, now fitness watches are getting more and more advanced. Garmin has a lot of the newer Garmins now have this Pace Pro feature. That's a pretty handy tool to use too if you want. I would recommend, though, if you're going to try to use something like this, make sure you use it in some training runs right before the race to get familiar with it. But you can basically program in your pacing strategy if you want to have more of a negative or positive split, and it'll adjust your guideline based on every mile. So if it's more hilly, it'll tell you what pace to hit for that hillier mile versus a flatter mile, and it'll show you how close to your target pace you are. So there's some good videos and articles on that. I also have, for the real data geeks, a whole kind of negative split marathon planning worksheet. Again, I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but for those data geeks out there, just take a look at this QR code if you want to scan it and use this for yourself, or just shoot us a note. I'll have our contact info at the end of the presentation. All right, now let's talk about what everyone's wondering, the race day weather forecast. All right, where are we? Guess what? It is perfectly average. It is exactly what is typical, is usually 46 to 64 degrees. Right now, the forecast is 48 to 68 degrees, so maybe a couple degrees warmer than usual, but within just a couple degrees. Winds look to be relatively calm. This is really good running weather. The humidity, we'll have to see what that might look like come race day, but right now, the weather is looking very good, clear, no rain and whatnot. So I'm very excited. Hopefully folks will be pretty happy about this. The forecasted humidity looks like it'll be pretty low. It might be a little bit higher overnight, but in general, really, really good conditions. I think they'll be challenging those world record marathon times. But check the forecast, because if it's 48 in the morning and it's windy, guess what? It's going to feel like low 40s or maybe even high 30s sometimes. So if that's the case, think about having an extra layer. We usually recommend getting like a poncho, just something to protect you from the wind that helps to prevent you from having that urge of going to the bathroom as well. I sometimes even bring disposable like latex gloves just to keep my fingers warm while I'm waiting in the start corrals. And then I'll toss it on the side. They have trash bags. They also have, if you want to bring clothes that you just want to donate to charity, they pick up all the clothes and they donate all the clothes that people toss at the start line to charity. So don't feel bad if you want to wear an extra layer and toss it at the start line. All right, now finally let's talk about spectating. So if anyone's out there, you got friends, you got family, people that want to come cheer you on, they can come and join us. I have set up, last year I did this, and I'm going to use the same little chat app called Team Reach. We set up a group code. It's just T2 Crew. We'll be coordinating information about our cheer stations on there. It's a way to share photos. If you don't have people's cell phone numbers, it's a great way just to connect. So a couple of our coaches and spectators will be on this, and we'll have a couple of different cheer stations. So we actually have a form you can fill out if you want to get an email from us about the race day details for spectating, or if you want to join us and help out with setting up and creating high five zones and all that fun stuff. You can fill out this form or share this form with your friends and family. There's also a whole spectator guide on the website as well. And obviously, the phone app is the best thing. Make sure your friends and family have that. They can track you. They can send you a cheer along the way. And I also create this big, crazy spreadsheet with everyone's info on there. So if you now have your bib number, they've now posted the bib numbers. If you have your bib number and you know your start corral and all that, you can enter your name into this big spreadsheet that I have, and we will predict at what time of day you'll be at every part of the course. And that's a real handy thing to share with friends and family. All right, so our cheer stations, just real quick, we have a north side one. It'll be at mile 7.7, so Inner Lakeshore Drive and Grace, kind of where Sheridan Road, where you are turning west at the very north end of the course. So it's up near a little bus stop up there. We'll also have a cheer station. I will be down here pretty much all day at mile 22 to 24, the very south end, kind of between two aid stations, roughly 29th and Michigan Avenue. So I can see you both going south and going north. If you need any last minute supplies, I'll be there with all sorts of goodies. And then we'll have a final cheer zone near the expo, actually near McCormick Place, about a mile from the finish. So we'll have a couple people there to cheer you on for that final mile. So this is what the mile 22 and 24 point looks like. Last year, we set up our fun little unicorn cheering squad, a bunch of T2 signs along the way, handing out high fives. We might have some fun treats. I'll always have blister Band-Aids and Vaseline and things like that. If you have any chafing or need some last minute help or some encouragement, come see us. We'll have a couple of coaches down there to cheer you on through the final miles. All right. And if you are having friends or family make cheer signs, a couple quick tips I always like to give. Make sure they get nice neon or bright colored signs, and make sure they use like higher contrast colors, because there will be a lot of signs and it's hard sometimes to notice some. So getting a cutout of somebody's head is always a good way to make sure that people know whose sign that is for. Makes your friends and family easy to spot. So they do sometimes have cheer making signs or cheer sign making supplies at the expo that you can pick up as well. All right. And then finally, I want to mention this spreadsheet. So I have this big, crazy spreadsheet. Basically, the way this works, you just put your name in. If you want to add any comments about what you're wearing, so we know how to spot you, put that in there, put your bib number in there, put your wave and your corral in there, and then it'll predict at what point, what time of day, based on your corral and the expected time that you'll cross the start line. It'll predict when you'll be at our different cheer stations. It'll predict when you'll be at our photo spots with some of our photographers. So it's a really handy sheet for us, our coaches and staff, to be able to track you, but also great if you want to share it with friends and family. So feel free to add your name, add your info on there, and we'll use that to track you on race day. We'll have our pasta dinner coming up here pretty soon as well. Make sure you've RSVP'd for that. And also, if you have anything that you want us to have for you, I'll be at mile 22 and 24 with a big bag of supplies, salt pills, extra gels, biofreeze, Vaseline, anything that you can probably think you might need. But if there's anything that we haven't thought of, feel free, let us know or give it to us, and we can make sure that we have it there for you as an extra little boost on the final stretch. So again, meet at T2HQ. This is where once you finish, you'll just turn left, walk down a block basically, and regroup with us at our T2HQ. Just because spectators can't get into the race in the morning, make sure that they're aware of that. and that the T2HQ is probably the best spot for them to meet you, especially if the weather is not great or it's cold. It's better to get warm as quick as you can. All right. And finally, race day schedule. If you want to plan out everything from start to finish, let's talk through this real quick. So the important thing to know, this is one of the world's biggest marathons. It does take a while to get things started. It does take a while to get through security and get checked in. So we have kind of a setup where if you're planning to be in wave one, these are the times you need to be entering Grant Park at least an hour ahead of time, because the corrals do close early and you don't want to be getting in there last minute because that's when everybody does. So if you think about your morning, budget about 2 hours. It could take up to 30 minutes to get through security, could take 30 minutes to get through a restroom line. The corrals close almost 30 minutes early, so that right there is about 90 minutes. And you're walking around probably about a mile just to get, from point A to point B into your corral. So when you add all that up, it takes an hour and a half to 2 hours to get through everything. So just keep that in the back of your mind. If you come to T2HQ early in the morning, this is what our schedule will look like. We'll open up early in the morning, might even be there earlier than 5:30, but we say come around 5:30. We'll have a little team talk and do a team photo at about 6:15, and then we'll start walking athletes in roughly 6:30 wave one, 7 a.m. wave two, 7:25 wave three, just to get you guys in on time. At 9:30, we will open up T2HQ to friends and family as well. So if you have friends and family who are coming, they can come hang out here. Once we get all the athletes out, it's less crowded. They're more than welcome to come hang out at our T2HQ. There are also the bike valet and divvy stations nearby, so you can take advantage of that. But there's tons of public transportation options. It's easy to get around. It's a very centrally located location. There's a parking garage right next door as well. So it really is a nice VIP treatment way to experience the Chicago Marathon. The marathon has an official VIP area hospitality tent. I think it costs $260 and it doesn't have everything that we have. So you guys are really getting treated well. I'm not going to go through all the details of each wave and kind of where they are. Look through the participant guide for that. Make sure you're familiar. They'll have guidance on which gate they recommend you walk through and the routes to get to your gear check areas. They will have water fill stations. And a new thing too, although I didn't see this clearly outlined in the athlete guide, I met with the race director last week, and he mentioned that they are now adding bottle fill stations at all of the aid stations as well. So not just in the start in Grant Park, but they will have, I think he said there are red signs on the second half of the race, where you can actually, if you are running with a bottle, you can quickly fill up. So you don't have to grab cups and kind of manually fill up. So stay tuned for that. This is what my morning routine will look like. If you want to write out your whole morning routine, wake up around 4:30, eat breakfast, head down to T2HQ, get there by 5:30, take care of your porta potty or restroom needs, get your gear together, hang out with people, and then finally take your final snack around 5:45-ish. Maybe use the bathrooms one more time, take our team photo together, and then we'll all head in and we'll walk in together. If you need a detailed checklist, I have a whole webpage now with a morning checklist and a little video talking through some of the things that I like to put in my gear in the morning to have for after the race. So things to think about, maybe an extra pair of shoes or flip-flops when you finish, an extra pair of socks, nipple protection. I like to use some Vaseline or blister Band-Aids or A&D cream. Baby ointment cream is really good. Vitamin A, vitamin D, really good for healing the skin, both after the race or just to prevent some chafing. Make sure your GPS watch is charged, or bring your charger. Make sure you have a little morning snack, something that's easy to digest. Think about your pre-race fueling plan, have that. Maybe bring an extra snack to take with you when you go into the start, maybe an extra water bottle, something to toss. Think about the weather. If you want to have a tossable layer, think about sun protection, sunscreen, lip balm. And then post-race, bring a towel if you want to shower at the Roosevelt Gymnasium. We have access to their showers as well. Have a clear security bag if you want to bring anything into the official gear check. I like to also bring an extra bag for my wet clothes for afterwards, get all the wet stuff off. And then some recovery gear, like compression socks, anything that you know that you might need for after the race. And then, of course, something nice and tasty as well. If you do end up getting blisters, if you haven't dealt with them before, actually, one thing I recommend are these are called hydrocolloid Band-Aids. The Band-Aid brand is usually in a silver container. These are really good for preventing blisters. You can wear them before, just to, if you know you get blisters in certain parts of your feet, or just to have for after the race as well. If you get blisters, it's a great way to heal afterwards. All right, that was pretty much it. I know this went long, but I just want to say thank you to everybody. If you do have any questions, post them in our Facebook groups. You can shoot us an email. If you need any of the photos we took during the season, we put those in our photo albums online. And yeah, we're looking excited. And based on the weather, we're very excited to see what'll happen on race day. It should be perfect conditions, hopefully, this year. So hopefully we'll see these smiles from start to finish. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the recording and open up to questions. So thank you all and get ready.